Welcome back to Raw Politics. Now, the UK will slash tariffs on almost all of its imports to zero in the event of a no-deal Brexit. That was the message from the British government today as it tried to calm fears of surging inflation and a no-deal economic shock. Now, there would also be no new border checks on goods moving between Ireland and Northern Ireland. Let's take a closer look at the UK's new trading plans. Tariffs on 87% of all goods would be slashed to zero. That would still leave 82% of EU imports tariff-free, down from 100%. However, there would be new tariffs on a number of industries, including agriculture, beef, dairy, and the automotive industry. What will this mean in practice, though? Fully furnished cars imported from the EU would be subject to a 10.6% levy. All right, Britain's Brexit Minister Stephen Barclay defended the new tariffs this morning and denied that Northern Ireland would be treated differently to the rest of the UK. Let's take a listen.
No, what we've done is we've announced temporary measures, a modest liberalisation. At the moment, it's 80% of our trade, which is on zero tariff. It will move to 87%. We're going to obviously listen to businesses in terms of what the impacts of that are. But these are the real-term consequences of the vote in the House of Commons last night. It does impact business. It does create uncertainty for business, and that is damaging to jobs of your viewers.
And it did not take long for the EU to hit back at that. Let's have a listen to what the chief spokesman of the European Commission, Margaritis Schinas, had to say about the tariffs.
The differential treatment of trade on the island of Ireland and other trade between the EU and the UK raises concerns, and in the event of no deal, the Union has already made clear that it will apply its normal third country trade regime to all trade with the United Kingdom, and accordingly charge MFN tariffs on imports from the UK into the EU.
And joining us to discuss this is Irish MEP with the European People's Party, Sean Kelly, and still with us is British MEP with the European Conservatives and Reformist Group, Dan Dalton. All right, I will start with you, Sean. After all of the political wrangling and focusing on the votes of the day, are we actually staring down the barrel of what is the biggest issue here when it comes to trade tariffs, business, and how will it affect the lives of ordinary people? Let me just quote Carolyn Fairburn from the Confederation of Business Industry, and she said, "This is the biggest change in terms of trade since the mid-19th century." That is a massive thing.
It is, but we're staring down a lot of barrels at the minute because a lot will depend on what happens in the vote tonight, what happens subsequent to that. So I think issuing statements like this at this particular time, while they may be helpful in the sense of creating some type of certainty for British businesses, the reality is that this is a two-way street. Goods come into the European Union, goods come into the United Kingdom from the European Union. They'll have to sit down and work out a parallel regime, an equitable regime, and the European Union is not going to change its rules in relation to third countries without having an opportunity to work out a free trade agreement with the United Kingdom. So this is, I think, a lot of scaremongering in the broader sense, in European terms, trying to make the people at home in the United Kingdom feel comfortable. And in relation to Ireland, we're not really sure.
Is it scaremongering? I mean, we look at the figures, we're looking at tariffs either going up or going down depending on the industry and how it would affect businesses. Is it scaremongering, or this is very real now? It's as real as it gets?
But the UK has got to prepare for this. I mean, we are 2 weeks from a potential no-deal scenario. Now, it's my view that no deal will not happen, so hopefully this is all hypothetical. But the reality is we've got to have a tariff schedule ready, and this is actually quite a big liberalisation in some ways, but also not a huge liberalisation. I mean, it's only from 80% to 87% of goods now that are tariff-free. Many of them are very small tariffs anyway, less than 5%. So it's not a huge liberalisation. And what they've tried to do, I think, is pick out those really specialised industries that really need some protection, and quite limited, some agricultural products and cars, and wherever possible, be as liberal as possible on all of the
So
others.
this is not scaremongering, as Sean was saying. This is planning from your point of view.
Well, in my opinion, it has to be done. You know, the impact and the way it's reported might end up like that, but the reality is it's got to be done.
It's got to be done. All right, let's hear from somebody, though, who would be directly affected by these tariffs. Thomas Cooney farms beef and dairy in Ireland, about 15 kilometres from Northern Ireland, and he's joining us now via Skype. Thomas, all right, we really would like to know how these, tariffs would affect people like you. When you heard about the announcement today, we knew it was coming, when you saw the figures, what is your reaction?
Our reaction is it would have a detrimental effect on our business. Basically, 50% of everything that's produced on my farm in beef and dairy, 50% of it goes to the UK. And like, there's huge concerns among other farmers in other sectors. You have lamb and pork and poultry is being talked about as well. It's a huge impact because there's 300,000 jobs at stake in rural Ireland at this, and those 300,000 jobs need to be protected. They would be put in jeopardy because like 50% of our product go into the UK, and we would need the EU to stand behind small countries like Ireland if this happened. And there would need to be a robust solidarity fund put in place to tide us over until we find alternative markets, which wouldn't happen overnight. So it's very worrying times for Irish farmers, and we'd be saying that it's time for the EU to stand together on this one and support us.
Yeah, Thomas, I understand the worries of our Irish farmers, but the negotiations have been going on for 2 years, and this was one of the possibilities that was being looked at. What did you do to prepare for an eventuality like this, now that it could be real?
We have been liaising with our Taoiseach, with our Prime Minister, and we have been lobbying the EU Commission. We've been lobbying MEPs there like Sean. Look, there's so much of it is out of our control. That is the problem. All we can hope for at this stage is that, as Sean said, that there is some provision put in place that we will be able to trade, and we will be asking for those tariffs not to be implemented, that we would still have direct access to the UK market. That's what we have been looking for all along. Ideally, what we would want is continued access to the UK market. If that doesn't happen, if there's tariffs put in place, it's going to leave us uncompetitive. We're not going to be able to produce our food at that cost and pay the tariff on it. It wouldn't be viable. So if we don't get access to the UK market, we must have the EU must stand behind countries like Ireland. This is a time where the EU needs to stand together. We can't do it on our own. We need the EU to stand behind us on this one.
I do want to ask you one more question. Because we are looking at some between 50 and 60% tariffs on maybe beef, dairy, and those products. How long can you personally sustain your business if these tariffs came into place? How long before you say, I'm in danger?
It wouldn't be very long, because this has had an effect on beef prices already. Because there is with the way sterling is at the moment, it's having an impact already. It's leaving the markets nervous as we stand. So we would need funding supports put in place immediately. We wouldn't be able to stand it very long.
All right, thank you for that, for joining us tonight. Thomas Cooney, he owns a farm just 10 miles from the border there, the Irish border. All right, let's talk about that. I mean, I think they're one of the biggest groups that would be affected. What do you tell people like Thomas Cooney now that we're very close to what possibly could be a no deal?
Well, I've said all along that I think there will be a deal. I think if the United Kingdom votes, and I expect they will vote tonight, not to leave without a deal, that will take some of the pressure off. And then we will have to try and work out what is going to happen. Anything could happen.
But they're already feeling the pain, as you're saying.
I think this actually brings stark reality to what actually could happen. Obviously, from the European Union point of view, I will be ensuring that they will stand 100% behind Ireland, make available all the instruments that can help them in the event of a serious crisis, which there could be, things like intervention, market supports of different kinds, and also probably a weakening or a lessening of the state aid rules.
But isn't the point market liberalisation? That the UK wants to trade freely around the world, and if you're talking about intervention, I mean, that defeats purpose.
Well, this is the point. I mean, the tariffs that the UK is proposing to put on EU beef and the beef from the farmer there are much less than the tariffs the EU is proposing to put on UK beef. So the only way you can avoid this situation is by getting a free trade deal or getting some sort of deal that can be imposed. Otherwise, the UK would have to apply its tariffs if it offered the EU something special to every other country in the world, which would cause the same problems for UK beef farmers. So, yeah, we want much more free trade, much lower tariffs, but the EU is proposing to put on much heavier tariffs on the UK than these ones that the UK are proposing.
All right, I'll just quickly read this comment from the European Council of Young Farmers on tariffs. They say that this is potentially devastating on their businesses, and this just echoes what Thomas there was saying earlier.